Blurbs podcast. Today's guest is Birdy Rivers. Hi, Birdy.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
I'm Birdy Rivers. I'm a recently new published author. I did publish a series a few years ago. Took a little bit of a break from writing and being in the industry to raise my twins, who are now 2.5. So I was a little now able to kind of get back into writing and kind of focus on that. And back in May, I released a new series called Children of the Empire. The first book was released in May, and the second book will be hopefully released in October.
Nice. Wow, that's quick. So when did you first realize you wanted to be an author?
Well, writing, I would say probably like high school, I got really into writing. It just kind of became like a way for me to just process like depression and anxiety and a lot of the things that I was dealing with. And I also really enjoyed reading. So as I got older, like kind of more like college years, I was like, I wonder if I could really want to, I really just decided, hey, I want to try this creative writing thing. So I wrote my first book when I was in college many years ago. I don't even know where that book is to this day. It's probably saved on a flash drive somewhere, to be honest, but it was the stepping stone to get me to where I needed to be. And then, as life kind of took a turn, I ended up having to be hospitalized for my depression and anxiety, and kind of really needed to focus on myself and get myself okay, just dealing with all the things that come with mental health. And so once I kind of got myself resituated and back, and I was actually a medical assistant way before I ever became an author. So as I was doing all of that, I slowly decided, hey, I'm going to start writing again, and or take writing a little bit more seriously. I always kind of wrote journal wise and stuff, just to help process my emotions and things that I was dealing with. But I didn't really get that creative aspect back going until probably my mid-20s. And it's always just kind of been a dream of mine to be an author, to be a published writer, to just reach people in however capacity that I could. So that's kind of how I got started. And like I said, it's been kind of ups and downs, having to take breaks in between because life happens, and sometimes you just need to reprioritize and then go back to your goals. So now, in my early 30s, I have finally gotten myself on track and finally am really making my dream happen.
Wait, you're in your 30s?
Yeah, wow. I'm 31. I'll be 32 in November. I know.
Wow. I'll be 34 in December, and everybody's like, 34, wait.
Yeah. People are a lot of times people will be like, you have twins, you look like you're 21. I'm like, well, thank you, but I'm actually 31. Thanks for shaving 10 years off. Appreciate that.
I wouldn't have went that far, maybe 18. I was like, wait a minute, when you say you had twins and you was you finished college and mid-20s, I was like, mid-20s.
Yeah, no, I'm early 30s. I guess that's a fortunate / unfortunate thing to say. It's kind of one of those things as you get older, I feel as I get older, I'm glad to be older. It's so weird because thinking about it, I'm my 30s have been so much kinder to me so far than my 20s have ever been. And because I struggled so much in my 20s, and my 30, that saying 30 is the new 20 kind of really I don't know, resonated with me, because it is I feel I finally have some grasp on my life, some words of where I'm going. But yeah, people will be like, you have twins, or and it's really funny. I'm like, yeah, they're mine. People are so shocked when I go out with my 2.5-year-olds. They're like, oh, they're yours? I'm like, yes, they're mine. They look just like me. How did you miss? But I guess I look younger than I am, and I'm not going to complain in that aspect.
So what inspired you to write your Children of the Empire saga?
Well, so it's a fairy tale retelling, and I've always wanted to do a fairy tale retelling. I've always loved fairy tales. I mean, I grew up a Disney princess, so growing up with all the Disney movies and being just really into that. And I mean, when I was 5, people would be like, what do you want to be when you grow up? My answer was a princess. So, it only seems natural that I guess I ended up writing a retelling of these classic fairy tales. And I'd always wanted to do a fairy tale retelling, but just never really could figure out the way to go about it. And I was rewatching the Disney movies with my girls because, you know, they have to be Disney princesses too. So we were rewatching them, and I was like, it kind of like re-inspired me to be like, I really want to do a retelling of fairy tales. And I was like trying to decide, like, okay, do I do Snow White? Do I do Beauty and the Beast? What should I do? And then I was like, you know what? Why not just do them all and put them all together, you know? And that's what I ended up doing. So I ended up doing Beauty and the Beast, Snow White, Rapunzel, Sleeping Beauty, and Cinderella. And so they all interact in my book. You'll all see them. They're all, you know, that's a fantasy world created around the fairy tales, I guess you could say, or the fairy tales are immersed into the fantasy world. And it actually ended up merging with like an older idea that I had from years ago that I ended up just putting all together, and it made Children of the Empire.
Wow, that sounds interesting. I want to read it. So can you give our listeners like a brief summary of your books?
Sure. So with Children of the Empire, it's interesting. It starts off in a dystopian world, which you later find out is the curse, the sleeping curse that Snow White is under. And that kind of concept comes from the idea of coma patients creating worlds in their mind to help cope with the fact that they are in a coma. It also kind of stems from the concept, I don't know if you've ever heard like the crazy concept, but what if the world you know is a lie and you're really just sleeping or like in a coma, or it's just a dream type of a thing, and then you wake up in the real world. So I kind of used that but applied it to a curse. So when you first meet Snow White, she's living in what's called the Badlands. She's kind of on the run. She's hiding. You know, her stepmother is just, you know, wreaking havoc all over the empire. And she's just kind of hiding out, doing her own thing, trying to deal with her own trauma that she's experienced. One of the big things, because I've experienced a lot of trauma in my life, and I love fairy tales, but if you look at the root of fairy tales, where they originally come from, they're actually quite traumatic. And I wanted to make these characters real for people to relate to, because as fun as it is to live in that fantasy fairy tale setting, I wanted the characters to be relatable. So you're going to see these characters, especially Snow White, deal with the trauma of her past, the trauma of attempted murder, the trauma of attempted rape, and all of these things that kind of just are real, that real people deal with. But it's also nice to see that, like, oh wow, like, you know, especially for me, like I grew up loving Belle, you know, she was my favorite princess, still is, but you know, I grew up loving her, and the fact that she experiences something so traumatic, and to be like, wow, my favorite princess actually like related to something that I've gone through. So that was why I wanted to make these characters a little bit more real. As much as I love the Disney fairy tale versions of them, they really are kind of sugar coated and made to be kind of pretty and nice for kids. But the reality is, you know, for adults. And one of the things you'll see is, I always say, fairy tales aren't just for kids. So why can't fairy tales be for adults? So you'll see Snow White. She's off in this curse. She doesn't know she's in a curse. She just thinks this is her world. And you'll meet Xavier, who is her Prince Charming, I guess you could say. And you know, he has tasked with this job of saving her, along with their friends, you know, Rapunzel and Ella. And Ella is Cinderella. You'll see, like, as you read the book, you'll be like, oh, that's so and so, and you'll be able to put, you know, which fairy tale character is which character in my book. The names don't differ too much, but I didn't want them to be, you know, too exact to the Disney. Not that it mattered, but I just felt like might as well make it a little different. If I'm going to be making it mine, I might as well go the full mile and not just, you know, half do it. So, you know, they're tasked with this job of waking her up from this curse, and they do wake her up. And then you see them, how they go about taking back the empire. And in the second book, it's more about the war that they wage with the evil queen, and how they're trying to rebuild their world for a better, you know, for their children to be better. You know, that's the concept. You know, I mean, as having kids as myself, I always want to leave the world a better place for them, at least, you know, even if they're, you know, even though I've experienced things, I don't necessarily want them to experience those bad things. So about leaving, you know, how we want to leave the world a better place for our children. And I think, you know, anybody can relate to that who has kids. And even if you don't have kids, I mean, I would hope you'd want to leave the world a better place than how you found it, at least.
Right.
So it's I had a lot of fun, you know, having these characters interact, and these, you know, retelling these tales where, they are now all friends, they've grown up together. They're not just in their own separate little stories anymore. They've all kind of meshed together into one world. And it was a lot of fun to do it, and a lot of fun to think of ways to, how do I reinvent, how do I connect them, how do I connect the dots, because their stories are very different, but I found a way to make them all connect, so that yes, their stories are different, and yes, these characters experience different things, but at the end of the day, they have this united front against their enemy.
Yeah, wow. I love your message. I love that. I really do.
Thank
I feel like
you.
people should read it. So who
Thank
are
you.
so who are a few of your favorite authors, and have any of them inspired your novels? I know you said fairy tales.
Yes, fairy tales would be one, but so I would say, like, I was the kid in who, like, didn't like to read originally, which is so funny to say now because I'm such a bookworm. But originally I didn't like to read. I was not a reader, and I struggled in reading in school. I was, in the special reading class because I couldn't, I just had no desire to pick up a book. And then my fifth grade teacher, who bless her soul, I'm still friends with her to this day. She's an amazing person, and I contribute a lot of my writing career to her because she did kind of help me fall in love with books. And she decided, I'm not going to let this girl just fall behind. I'm going to find a way to get her reading. And she introduced me to Harry Potter. And I at first was like, the first Harry Potter book's not that big, but to a fifth grader looking at that book, I was like, I don't like to read. There's no way I'm going to read this book. But she was like, no, read it. I think you're really going to like it. So I ended up reading it. And of course, I fell in love with it. And before I knew it, I was reading all the books that had been published. And I think at the time, there was only like 3 or 4 books published. Obviously, she published more as I got older. So I'm one of the, the few, I guess, one of the kids who grew up with Harry Potter, so to say, that generation. And that spiraled me on to reading Lord of the Rings, which I ended up completely falling in love with J.R. Tolkien, falling in love with C.S. Lewis, all your classic fantasy writers. And then over the years, that branched out into like historical romances, paranormal romances. So, of course, some of my favorite authors would be like J.K. Rowling, J.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis. But I also really enjoy Willow Winters, who is a romance author. I love her books. I really enjoy I think it's Adriana Mathers. She writes a lot of great paranormal books that are based in Salem that I find very interesting. I believe, if I remember her history correct, her family ties actually back to like the Salem witch trials. So she kind of writes about that, which I find very interesting. So, but I have a vast array of authors that I read. I read pretty much anything. Definitely romance is up my alley, whether it's contemporary, whether it's paranormal, fantasy, anything. I like romance. I'm kind of a helpless romantic, so I can't help it, but I enjoy a lot of different genres.
Nice. So within your saga, are you going to start adding more Disney princesses and more princesses in?
I've thought about it. I don't think for the first 3, I probably won't. I'm probably going to stick to my main 5 that I have. I would love to do another trilogy, or at least another book based off of their children, like kind of like the next generation of children of the Empire. I would just think it would be interesting to see, how do those kids react to having such famous parents? Snow White is the famed Snow White, and, Beauty and the Beast, I just thought it would be really interesting to have these heroes kind of follow their children. I am working on a standalone Little Mermaid retelling, which will be completely separate from Children of the Empire. And then I'm also working on a separate Red Riding Hood retelling, which will also be separate. But for the actual, when I explore like the children aspect, Snow White's, her children and stuff, it might be there. I might end up bringing in some other stories. I haven't fully decided that yet, but it would be fun if I could.
Yeah, because whenever I watched, what's the girl with the long hair?
Rapunzel.
Her, yeah.
Yes.
when I watched her movie tied in with the 2 girls. Man, I'm terrible.
The 2 girls. Oh, Frozen. They
Yes,
tied
yes,
into
yes,
Frozen.
yes, yes.
Yes. As
Yeah, and
you
I
can
was like,
tell, I know my Disney a little bit. Not as much as some. I mean, I know a good amount, but I do. I definitely don't know as much as some. They ended up like having her like Rapunzel be like show up to Elsa's coronation or something like
yeah.
that. So it would be so fun to explore and that's kind of where like I don't know if anyone's ever watched Once Upon a Time, which was on ABC for a long time. Probably one of my favorite shows that I've probably rewatched a handful of times over the years, even though it's done and over with. But they have all the fairy tale characters kind of interact, but they take it a step further. They have like where they have Wizard of Oz and they do bring in Frozen. They bring in Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, they bring in a whole bunch. And I always loved the way they weaved it all together. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And that was actually part of my inspiration for Children of the Empire was like, wow, like they found a cool way to have all these characters interact and kind of weave their stories together. So I wanted to find my own way of doing that because I thought the way they did Once Upon a Time was just absolutely brilliant.
It was. I love that show too.
I loved it too. I still rewatch it. Like it's on Disney Plus. It was on Netflix for the longest time. Now I think it's on Disney Plus. But I'll still like occasionally I'll watch it from season 1 all the way to I don't even know what season it ended off at, but all the way to the end, even the last season, which I know wasn't everyone's favorite, but I'll still rewatch it just because it was so interesting and I don't know, everybody they cast it was well done. Everybody was very it was very interesting the way, and I think that's really the first time anyone has ever really tried to weave together all of the princesses or all of the fairy tales into one world. And then when they brought in like Alice in Wonderland and the Wizard of Oz and Neverland, I was like, wow, these guys are really upping it to a whole new level. I'm not quite sure I could aspire to that level, but hey, I'll try.
Yeah, I was thinking like maybe you can continue on the story. Well, if the last season was really bad, then I don't think you should do that one. But like from where it was good and then continue on, then maybe
the way I look at it is I look at the last season of Once Upon a Time as its own like separate entity, because if you try to like relate it to the whole series altogether, it kind of falls flat. But if you look at it as its own series, as its own, I guess, season, and it's kind of, yes, it ties into Once Upon a Time, I almost look at it as like a spin-off in a way. And if you look at it that way, it becomes a little bit better. Like you're like, oh, it doesn't fall as like flat as you would think it would. But I still enjoyed it, and I still enjoyed the way that they attempted to do what they did. I mean, I give them props for it because, you know, it was definitely not an easy task.
Oh yeah, I want to thank you so much, Birdie, for coming on my show and speaking about your saga.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here.
You have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey everyone, I want to thank you all so much for listening to my interview with Birdie. If you would like to view any of her books, purchase any of her books, see what she has going on, seeing her upcoming book, or purchasing her upcoming book, you can go to her website. I've linked it below. It is on Facebook. It's facebook.com Birdy Rivers, and you can just view what she has going on, view her books. I know I'm definitely going to check it out because it brings back childhood memories. Also, if you would like to support this podcast, you can support this podcast by going to Buy Me a Coffee. I will link it below. Go to Buy Me a Coffee, and a portion of the proceeds will go to Freedom Writers. It is an organization by Aaron Gruhl. I don't know if you all watch the movies watch the movie Freedom Writers, but that's who my proceeds will be going to. A portion of my proceeds will be going to. And also a portion of my proceeds will be going to a new camera and a new mic so I can upgrade my podcast. Thank you all so much for listening to my podcast. I hope you all have a great day. And if you know anyone interested in being interviewed, please let them know that they can message me and be interviewed. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.